Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another podcast of your favourite self-improvement program. My name is Chris Carlos, and once again joined here with my best friend, Mr. Brendan Lee. Brendan, why don't you take it away?
Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the big picture. So a lot of people are probably thinking of like brainstorming ideas and things like that you would do in a company when they say think big picture. But what we're talking about more is this idea of having like an end goal in mind and then thinking the small incremental steps to how to get there. So I'm going to hand it back to Chris.
Yes, so always I think maybe this will be slightly more abstract than our previous topics, but again, as always, we want to give you the practical advice to get to where you want to be, not 0.1%. So I think in terms of the big picture, before we move on to specific projects, we should probably talk a little bit about what is the big picture. Kind of ties into like the pursuit of happiness, your male drive, all those sorts of concepts. So what do you think for young entrepreneurs? Probably focus on males, but a lot of the lessons apply females as well. Up and coming mid-20s, there's so many things vying for your attention now in the 21st century. How do you stay on track? Should you stay on track? What do you think?
Well, I think nowadays, if you want to be successful, you've got to have a purpose. So you've got to have that one thing that's sort of driving you overall, whether, something's got to take priority, whether it be your career or just your personal life, whatever it is at that instance in time. But the most important thing, I think, is if you're thinking big picture, is to set the goal for yourself first and foremost, because like, as we've said before, you're ahead of 99% of the population if you're just taking action.
Yeah.
If you're taking actionable steps,
sure,
you're doing well already. Then when you've set yourself that goal, it's not just enough to actually set yourself a goal. You got to stay on track.
Yeah.
So you've got to make positive steps to actually achieving it. So you've got to have something to keep you on track. You've got to have things driving you. So like, for example, I know you're working on a project at the minute and you've got a bunch of wee post-it notes telling you what you've got to have done by this date and this date and this date, but it's all related to this one overarching goal.
That's right.
But there's a whole bunch of different wee projects that have to be done in order to get and what I've noticed a lot with successful people is that they don't get too caught up in the details. So they sort of get something done. It's done well, but when it's done, they're saying, I can't waste time anymore on doing this one thing. I have to get this other thing done.
Yeah.
And they're willing to put it to the side because it's done well. Yeah. They could maybe make an improvement to turn it up 1% better.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is it's already probably better than what 90% of people are turning out. So what's the point in wasting all that time when they could be accomplishing so much more?
That's huge. Yeah. I think that you really hit the nail on the head there. And I probably stumbled across it a couple of years ago. It's especially, if you're good at your job, regardless of what field you're in, people who are good tend to be perfectionists. And you can sit down and you can really drill into your project. But if you spend 2 months doing that, or you spend 2 months turning out 5 different things that are all of a good standard, when people look at you, they're not going to say, well, that one perfect project, you're the best. They're going to say, look at the volume of work you've turned out, that's of a good standard. I think what's interesting is, though, just you kind of made me think about something there. We're talking about career, and you said, what's your drive, what's your purpose? Do you think that drives such as, you want to try and find a good life partner, you want to try and, find a path outside of your career, are they valuable things to be doing? How do you think that ties in with the overarching field, the path that you're on, your pursuit of happiness?
Well, I think that's a good point. For probably 99.9% of the people here, they're looking to hear how they can get better in terms of their professional life. But if all you're doing is working, you won't be happy as a person. You won't be a complete person. So you do have to make time for other things. So when I say you got to have that purpose, that's the overarching thing. That's the main thing that's driving you at that point in time. Yeah. So say for both of us right now, it's probably career is the overarching thing that's driving us. But we always make time for friends, for social events, for doing stuff, outside of work. You gotta have things that keep you occupied in another way.
But I think we said before as well that it's like a tornado that ties into each other as well, because being involved in those social events, the social skills you're building, the people you're meeting, can tie back into, what your ultimate goal and drive is.
Yes.
So I think you can't really consider these things in isolation, but I can see how some of the listeners are thinking, well, in a career it's almost easy because the steps are laid out in front of you. You have to do this, you pass these professional exams, you have to have this done, you have to have that done, you have to interview that, and you can see, the CEO sitting at the top of the pyramid, that's where you want to be. Certain things, like relationships, like, your social life, places like even your travel and personal life, the concepts there are sometimes a bit harder to nail down on. Are you on the path to those things that you want to do? Or should you be on the path, or should you just focus on where you can see the road is clear and let those things come as they come?
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's an important point as well, because there is going to be things that come into your life. And when I say set a goal at the start, you do have to be prepared to adjust for things coming in, new developments. Yeah. You have to be willing to change what you're doing in light of things changing. Mm-hmm. So people that are too stubborn and not willing to compromise, not willing to make adjustments, well, then they're not going to be successful in their purpose either. Yeah. So, what you'll often hear people in like job interviews or when they're testing, they want to hear if you're flexible, if you're adaptable, if you're willing to change your approach. Yeah. And a lot of people just pay that lip service and say, yeah, I'm very changeable, I'm very adaptable, I'm willing to take on new ideas. They don't actually mean it. But if you want to get good, you want to get very good, then it has to be something you're willing to do, because it'll help you accomplish your goals much faster and much more effectively.
Well, I totally agree, and I am a big advocate of total responsibility. So when you say, things coming into your life, changing scenarios, ultimately I feel that you're responsible for 99.999% of that. You can't be a successful person without really saying anything that happens to a very high extent is the total of your own making. Now, not to say that you mightn't get hit by a thunderbolt, whatever, your best friend gets run over, or something horrendous happens to you, and you've no power over that. But the small things, the when you're trying to get to the final 1%, in my opinion, from what I've seen day-to-day work, is it's minuscule, but it's all things that you have done. Like an example I give you from work last week, somebody in our company who's fairly high up, and he's not cracking into that last 1%. There's people at that level who you can tell are if we've both read the book Relentless by Michael Grover, you can tell there's people there that are the cleaners, that everything's done, cleaned, and in terms of self-improvement, it's probably the best book I've read.
So just explain to the people listening what a cleaner is.
So the Michael Grover, I think his name is, it's Gover, I think. The book's called Relentless, From Good to Great to Unstoppable. You'll find it quite easily on Google. So this guy was Michael Jordan's coach as he's coming through, and the book's about leaving a legacy behind. So Michael Jordan is playing in the NBA with other professionals, but why is he the only one that has shoes named after him? Why is Michael Jordan the name that people know who don't play basketball?
Yeah.
But he was playing with these guys who were super talented, so he explains kind of the stages of progression and success, and his ultimate stage of success is being a cleaner. And when you reach that stage, he says there are really no problems because you solve the problems before they start. And you do see people like that in the work environment. And even when everybody's at the same level, be it, department managers, whatever, up to senior managers, company directors, if you compare everybody, they're not the same. Some people, everything's done, there's never an issue, there's never complaining, and other people seem to bring a wave of woe with them. But I was looking kind of from the sidelines last week, and this guy just, very small things that you should do, but you don't think they'll have an impact, you don't think people will notice, but they do. So, turning up to meetings just a few minutes late, not being responsive when juniors are asking him for help, but not being outwardly unsuccessful or not being,
incompetent.
And not being incompetent, being good, because he has to be good to be where he is. Just the tonality to some people that he was speaking with. But you only see those things when you really step back and take a notice of it. And it's those tiny, tiny interactions and tiny things that happen every day that'll stop you breaking through to that last 1%.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. I mean, being able to take a step back, and that's effectively what we've been saying, is look at the bigger picture. So the people who are very successful, they have this ability to step back in these like really difficult, tense situations, really high pressure situations, and assess it coolly and calmly,
Yeah.
know what's going on, and are able, as you were talking about there, be able to see the dynamic at play. Whereas maybe that guy, he's just seeing stuff coming at him really quickly, and he just doesn't have that ability to see the matrix as it is.
One of you're saying that's true as well. Another book I'd recommend, Crucial Conversations. I'm not sure who wrote that, but it made a very good point that stuck with me. And when you say about those high stress and intense situations, I think it was something along the lines of the 1% of conversations that you have that you're under super amounts of stress, strain, uncomfortable conversations will dictate 25 or 30% of your outcomes. So those conversations where you're called off guard, someone says, "Can I speak to you?" It's not going to be good. You can feel the adrenaline pumping. The outcomes of those conversations that most people avoid, and for good reason, the best way to win an argument is to avoid it. But those conflicts that you get pulled into then, can have serious repercussions on your future career if you're not ready and you're not, ready to meet any objections with exceptional behaviour up until that stage.
Yeah. I would say to anyone who gets themselves caught in that sort of situation, the first thing is not to get defensive. The first priority in a conversation like that should always be to take that step back and analyse the situation.
Yeah.
So as soon as you know what's happening, be taking that step back immediately in your head and figuring out what happened instead of being like, it's not my fault, because
that's huge. Keeping quiet for 10 seconds, because it's so easy to burst out saying, but I didn't, this happened, that happened. And those conversations, though they're infrequent, they're not always, people aren't always out to try and score points or hurt you or bring you down. I've had to have one or two of those conversations, maybe two in the last 3 years. And it's been with people's best intentions at heart. Obviously when you're telling somebody something that they don't particularly want to hear, the easy thing to do is to jump to your defensive, or for them to jump to the defensive. But sometimes, as you say, taking a step back, there's lessons to be learnt there.
Yeah, I think being responsive to feedback and actually taking it on board rather than seeing it as a slight is a very important thing in order to be successful. Yeah. I think we've kind of neatly talked about this idea of the big picture now. I don't really think there's much more to add. Can you think of anything, Chris?
No, I think big picture for me, ultimately, there's a lot out there about ego. And as you become more experienced, older, maybe, I think your ego shrinks. You stop thinking about, how am I going to look coming out of this, and you start thinking about what am I going to learn. I think that's really the summary. If you're looking at the big picture, you don't get caught up in the small things that you'll waste time in. The conversations that you have, there's something that can be learned from all of them. Sometimes, people are wasting your time. Sometimes people are out just to try and score points. But if you do take a step back, as we said, look at the big picture, realise, what you can learn from and what you just need to ignore. Yeah,
I think that puts a nice bow on everything. So, yeah, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And we're going to have a final episode in the series to come next week. And as usual, you can reach us on our Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or our email. And so if you have any questions, more than happy to answer them, or any feedback, as we've said, more than happy to take it on board. So signing off, Brendan Lee and
Mr. Chris Carlos. See you next week, guys.
See you next week.